Hi guys, it's Colette, and today we're going to be working with these Turquoise Holographic nail foil strips. If you like nail art, be sure you're subscribed to my channel, My Simple Little Pleasures, and if you'd like to see how I did this manicure, just stay tuned. The first thing I'm going to do before I even apply my base coat is to get all these little strips ready. I have my nail foil right here, and it comes in this little jar. When you take it out, it's basically a roll of very thin, very shiny foil. And I'm going to cut off a good sized chunk here to get started with. The way that you cut it is going to be partially up to your personal preference. Like for me, I'm going to be cutting the strips this long direction, even though I'm going to have a little bit more waste, so that I can have flat strips. You can see it's got a little bit of a curve from being all rolled up. So while you could, cut like a small section like this big, wide enough for your finger, and cut it this direction, then all of the pieces would be slightly curved. So what I'm going to be doing is cutting it in this direction, and since I don't need the whole thing, I have a little bit more room to have a grip, and I'm just going to go along and try to get fairly uniform thin strips like that. In fact, those are maybe even a little bit thick. I'm going to try and go a little bit thinner, and then when I'm done, I'm going to cut across the top and basically release them all. I'll actually probably need another strip to have enough for both my hands, but I've just got a plastic lid here. They're useful for so many things, and like I said, I'm just going to go across the top and cut them loose. And you want to make sure you have enough for all your nails, but not too much because you don't want to be too wasteful with the foil. Although the strips are fairly long inside of here. See, I don't really want to unravel the whole thing, but even giving myself a generous amount, you can see there's many layers to this spiral, so plenty for several manicures. Next, on clean dry nails, I'm going to begin with a base coat, and I'm using Ready for Takeoff, which is a peel-off base. Makes things much easier when you're working with gel, but you can use a gel base coat if you prefer. Moving on to placing the strips. This is inspired by Chelsea Queen on Instagram, so for this first time I'm basically just following her instructions, and if, or more likely when, I do this again, I may play around a little bit more. So the gel that I'm using is my Pink Shellac Ultra Shine, and I'm going to start out on my pinky here. I'm just going to apply a thin, careful coat, being careful not to get it on my skin. And then I've got my small pointy tweezers, and I'm going to be using those to pick up the strips, which I just have still sitting in the plastic lid. So let me just grab a piece here. There's so many, they're kind of hard to just grab one. But there we go. I'm going to start out in the middle of my nail to try and keep it kind of straight, and this first one's centered, and I'm just going to lay it right down like that on the gel and give it just a little touch to make sure that it's kind of settled in there. And then I'm going to follow that up by continuing to place strips on either side, and you want to minimize the gap between the strips as much as possible. Even a little bit of overlap is better than having a gap, since I am not using a base color with this. And you certainly could use a base color, but like I said, I'm basically just following instructions for this one, and she recommended just a clear gel, then placing the strips and curing, then you peel, and another layer of clear gel. So I'm going to go ahead and place all the strips before I cure this hand, and they do slide around pretty easily because, you know, this is still very wet and it won't dry until I put it under the UV lamp. So feel free to kind of adjust them as needed. Just gonna trim off a little bit of this edge so it's not quite so crazy while I'm still working. In addition to trimming the ends just a bit so they weren't like flopping around while I was working on a couple of the nails, I trimmed the corners just so they'd fit in a little nicer around the cuticles. And now we have the moment of truth, where I hope that these come off nicely. So I'm going to start at the outside and just start pulling it off, and there you can see the plastic and the part that was at the tip, and the rest is nicely staying where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh dang it, that one missed the corner. I'm going to go ahead and peel off the rest of these, and then we'll see how we stand. Alright, so that worked pretty freaking well. I have a couple spots like right here on the side of my pinky and right here at the very tip of my middle finger where the foils didn't completely adhere. I think what I'm going to do is try and use some of these little leftover pieces that I had and patch in those areas. Optional, but you guys know me. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of the top coat and go in those little small areas that are missing. Okay, let's see how my little fixes went. They went a little bit crooked, but I think, there, that one filled in. I was trying to keep them straight, like with the rest of the design, so it wouldn't hopefully be quite as obvious where I had patched them. Didn't quite work out like that, but I think it's much less obvious than a chunk of naked nail would be at the tip. And that's one reason why if I did this again, I might use a base color. But on the other hand, a base color peeking through would be just as obvious with this kind of a foil on top. I mean, you're not going to find a base color to match this, but I'm going to finish off with one more coat of the Pink Shellac Ultra Shine. And you'll just want to check whatever top coat you're using. This particular one cures for 60 seconds under the LED lamp. So here's the finished manicure, and I'm in love with this. I don't think that will surprise any of you guys that have been following me for a long time. This is right up my alley. And there were definitely a few issues, but that's to be expected with a new technique. And hopefully I'll be able to work those out on my next try. The thing that probably bothers me the most is how jagged the strips were at the cuticle. And working with a wet base made it a lot more difficult than I anticipated to trim them after placing them on the nail. So next time I just have to be more proactive and trim off some of those corners before I start applying them on the nail and try to get a smoother line there. The other thing I noticed is that the very tip of the nail is a little bit rough, can kind of feel the edges of the foil. I thought the polish would take care of that, but next time I think I'll just lightly buff across the tip to smooth out those edges. Working with a wet base made the corners a little bit harder, but I think it made everything else with these foils easier. When you're using the normal foil glue, as soon as you touch down that nail foil, that's where it's staying. You can't move it over a little bit. You can't pick it up and replace it. You have one chance to get it right, and if you don't, you're going to end up with wrinkles or holes or just a design that doesn't look much like it looks in the jar. And working with a wet base, you really get to move them around how you like it, and the nail foils themselves stay very smooth. So I really, really like this. Like I mentioned, this was inspired by Chelsea Queen on Instagram, and I'll link her video down in the information box if you'd like to check out her page. She did it in a holographic silver, which I would have done if I'd had a similar foil, but I only had a few colors in this smooth hollow. My favorite two were the turquoise, which I chose, and this black, which was a very close runner-up. And the black may be what I use next. But as far as where to get your nail foils, most of mine have come from Amazon, and I'll include links below for those if you're interested, but they come with a word of warning, and that warning is that you are probably not going to get the patterns that are pictured in the product listing. And in both cases, I ended up getting a few duplicates as well, which I wasn't too happy about. But then again, at the really cheap price point, I also really couldn't complain too much. But that's all just to say that if you want some really particular specific pattern or color, you're probably better off going to one of the sites that sells foils individually so that you can pick exactly what you want. But I'd love to hear what you guys think of this one. I hope you are looking forward to seeing some more because, like I mentioned, I'm definitely going to have to try this again. And if you think this is a little or a lot too much work, it definitely would work out as an accent nail too. You don't have to do all 10 nails, but on my channel, that's kind of one of my signatures. I don't only do one hand. I don't only do the 4 fingers that are showing on camera. I want to show that you can do a full manicure in whichever technique you want, but you don't have to. I think even just a single strip of the foil down the center of the nail with a plain black background would look really slick. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching. Here we are on the third day, and while this manicure is looking rather poorly, this is actually the best wear I've ever had out of nail foils. I lost this middle nail this morning just before I got into the shower. Lost this pinky last night while I was sleeping. I found the peely in my sheets. And this index nail last night right before I went to bed. So I'm going to give in and take off the rest, but I really enjoyed this manicure, and yes, it was grandma approved. She said something like, "How could anyone not like this?" But I'm going to take off the rest before they come off on their own, and I hope you guys enjoy the peel.